Mr. Ritchie,
Present.
Mrs. Bailey,
Present.
Mr. Palmer,
Present.
Mr. Honeycutt,
Present.
Mr. Campbell, Mrs. Garner,
Present.
Mr. Johnson,
Present.
Mr. Edwards,
Here. Present.
Mr. Sturtevant,
Present. Moving on to item 3. Get a motion that the school board adopts the agenda. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion for Mr. Edwards. We have a second for Ms. Garner. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie,
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt,
Yes.
Mrs. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant,
Yes. At this time, get a motion that the school board convenes a closed meeting for personnel matters regarding resignations, retirements, supplements, adjustments, employments, grievances, and discipline pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.23711A1. Do I have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion for Mr. Honeycutt, a second for Mr. Edwards. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie,
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt,
Yes.
Mrs. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant,
Yes. At this time, we're going to be going to closed meeting. We're going to go down the hall. I expect this will be fairly quick, no more than 10 minutes, and we'll be back shortly. We're going to continue on. Can I get a motion that the closed meeting be closed and the board certifies that to the best of each board member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting to which the certification applies, and 2, only such business matters as were identified in the motion concerning the closed meeting were heard, discussed, considered. We have a motion? We have a motion for Mr. Johnson and a second for Ms. Garner. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie,
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt,
Yes.
Mrs. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant,
Yes. The next order of business, we're going to stand for Pledge of Allegiance. Also, Mr. Campbell gave us a call and said that the moment of silence tonight should be dedicated towards Mr. Carter Thomas White. He was a young man that was killed in a hunting accident in Charlotte County. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 5, Superintendent's Report and Information Items. Mr. Nichols, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Sturtevant. Board members, I want to say thank you to you all for taking your time to come up for the special meeting. As you know, the way that we are trying to do our budget this year is fully transparent and an ongoing month-to-month process. And you know that one of our specific goals this year is that when we go to the Board of Supervisors, we want to be able to carry to them plans for increasing teacher salaries and for the need to maintain the elementary schools and even to renovate the elementary schools so that we will be able to know that they're going to last as they need to last into the future. You're also, I've heard many of you mention, and I too am very pleased that the work in maintenance that has been done under Mr. Dalton's direction for the last couple of months, one of the things that I have specifically asked that he do is take a good look at our elementary schools where we're having concerns and identify some placement and priority of those concerns and how we work with them. He's been working on that process with others from the community that have been experienced in helping in the various components. And he brought to my attention that we have some opportunities that we can take to help with cost, long-term cost, help with identifying what our priorities would be, and going back to the Board of Supervisors. And so the issue was that in order to take full advantage of some of these, we needed to have a presentation tonight and perhaps take action to be assured of some of the opportunities that are coming to us. So I'm going to actually turn this first part over to Mr. Dalton to introduce guests that he has brought to the table for a presentation for our consideration and hopefully action tonight, so that we can move forward in putting these into our plans for next year's budget and years down the road as we get information back from them. Mr. Dalton?
Good evening, board members. Mr. Nichols. Tonight, Mr. Nichols asked me, well, several months ago, to try to get together a 5-year maintenance/renovation plan together for our elementary schools. We do want to include all 4 elementary schools, because there are some gains there with South Hill Elementary also. We know for the most part, our La Crosse, Chase City, and Clarksville, 1961 models, not much renovation has been done since then. So after looking at all this, looking into something that's called energy performance contracting. It's pretty much budget neutral or budget positive. And after looking at that, we believe that this is our first step, so to speak. After we find out what we have there that energy savings will pay for, then we capitalize everything else that we may consider a need after that. But I do feel like this is the first building block in that 5-year renovation plan for the elementary schools. Tonight I have Ms. Kathy Cox with me. She's from Train. We're able to forego a lot of the formalities in the energy performance contracting because 100% of our controls at these 4 elementary schools are currently with Train. Therefore, we can, I guess, sole source with Train and move forward. Tonight she has a short presentation of what energy performance contracting is and kind of some goals that we went over together to tell us how we maybe can get to that point. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Kathy Cox with Train, and if y'all have any questions, we'll be glad to answer them at the end.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm probably loud enough without this. Is there, can I go without using?
We need that because it's being
It's
recorded.
being recorded.
Okay, all right. I'll try not to be so loud then and yelling it. I'm Kathy Cox. I'm an energy services advisor with Train. Most people don't know that Train is an energy services company. They think of us more as just HVAC. Our slogan, it's hard to stop a train. But I work for our energy services division, and I appreciate your time this evening. For the next 4 hours, I'll be talking about energy performance, just seeing if you're paying attention, energy performance contracting. I certainly invite questions while I speak. If there's something I need to slow down and walk through, I am certainly willing to do that. I fully want you to understand what EPC is. If I use acronyms, please raise your hand and slow me down. I'll be happy to explain. But EPC is Energy Performance Contracting. It is a state process. Oh, they've given me the clicker. Okay. So there's a couple components to an energy performance contracting. And the first I want to explain are called energy conservation measures, ECMs. We find that in most facilities, there is low-hanging fruit, and that's what we refer to as energy conservation measures, that if we make some changes, for instance, if we change out the current lighting from T8 32-watt lights to LED lighting, there is immediate energy savings associated with it, and it's something that we can show you. There's data to prove that there is energy savings changing out from those T8 fixtures to LED lighting. So that would be low-hanging fruit. We also look at water improvements. We look at the building envelope. The building envelope is where we can seal where any air infiltration is coming in from outside or if air is escaping from inside. We look at what type of building automation system you have. How's the building being controlled? And is it being controlled properly? Another low-hanging fruit would be, do you have the correct number of air changes in the building? And if so, are they too many or they are too little? So those are some of the things that are called energy conservation measures, ECMs, if you will. So we like to couple ECMs, energy conservation measures, with facility improvement measures, or FIMs. Within your schools, we see that there's some current challenges with the elementary schools. 1961 construction. Some of them have number 2 fuel oil as the fuel source. Clarksville Elementary, we visited there today, and we also visited with Chase City Elementary today to look at the school, look at some of the improvements that can be made. There are some HVAC upgrades that are evident. We want to also look at the sewer lines that are collapsing there. And these are facility improvement measures that I'm referring to, where they may not have a payback to them, an energy savings payback to them, but they're upgrades that need to be made at this time. And usually school systems and counties use performance contracting because you don't have that money readily available. You don't have $200,000 set aside to buy a new boiler. So you want to couple energy conservation measures with facility improvement measures so that, one, the savings leverages the payment of the upgrade. Because we know that you're trying to allocate future funding to middle school and to a middle school or high school renovation or construction, that's why we're only concentrating on the 4 elementary schools at this time. So when you add energy conservation measures and facility improvements to measures together, and then you couple that with a guarantee of the energy savings, that is an energy performance contract. Again, this is a state contract. We use the state template. We use the state process and how we go about it, and we follow the Code of Virginia. All this can be found on the DGS website. They are the administrator of the performance contract. And it's also Departments of Mines, Minerals, and Energy. They have an advocate who actually is an advocate for you, Mr. Charlie Barksdale, who is involved in the process and can answer any questions about the process. And he goes along, as we do, and asks questions on your behalf, and will meet with you and Mr. Dalton. So the savings over time from the energy conservation measures allow you to make the improvements today. You can do it for 15 years or 20 years. That's what the Code of Virginia allows, or the state allows. The FIMs are usually, we find those pretty easily, the things that you want to improve. They're usually deferred maintenance, and you need new equipment. And it can be chillers, or let me say, air conditioning equipment, or boilers that you need to replace. It has to be cash flow neutral or cash flow positive. We have to bring a project back to you that the energy savings will pay for the improvements. That's also a part of the Code of Virginia. Sometimes there are items within the project that do not cash flow, and we can either remove those from the project, or you can vote to add capital infusion or money to it, either at the beginning of the project or on an annual basis. There is a guaranteed energy savings. There is guaranteed energy savings with the contract. And what that states is there is a baseline. When we begin the project, we all agree on how much energy is currently being used. And I want to emphasize energy, how many BTUs are being used, or how much KW is being used. So we guarantee the energy savings, not the amount of money. We can equate to that, but the amount of energy that you're using. Because we all understand that energy over time has consistently cost more. We've seen natural gas go down, which is, hallelujah, it's a good thing. But we guarantee the amount of energy that you're using will decrease. Sometimes it's a hard concept to understand, so I like to kind of break it down to, say we were at your house, and you've been paying $100 for your utility cost. And you think, that's a little bit more than I want to be paying, so I want to do something that lowers that energy cost. So if you have a programmable thermostat, you would spend some time and go back to that programmable thermostat, and you want to set the temperature so that when you leave the house, your AC isn't, coming on, so it's a nice chilly 62. You may want to set it a little higher so the air conditioning isn't running throughout the day. But when you come home, it's comfortable and it's kicked on, let's say, 5-ish, depending on what time you come home. So in doing that, and using a programmable thermostat, you're saving $12 a month. But it did cost you some money if you didn't own a programmable thermostat, or if you had to spend some time. There is a cost associated with it. So that kind of explains just very, very basic of how an energy performance contract works. If you were spending $112 and it saves you $12, but you had to spend $10, your net gain is $2. But over time, your net gain would be quite a bit more. Is that concept? Yeah, okay. Under the umbrella of performance contracting, there is a multitude of activities you can do. We consider it a partnership. We want to be here today, tomorrow, and 30 years down the road. So Trane really looks to be a great partner to you. We work on what the schedule looks like. How does this fit into your funding availability? I work with most county financial advisors in understanding when the energy savings will start accruing, and then when a first loan payment would be due, so that we can align. We also look at what funding opportunities are available. There is a program right now called the Virginia Saves Program that I'm going to talk a little bit about, but it is first come, first serve, and I have used it on 2 other projects. Under performance contracting, you can do everything except bricks and mortar. Although inside the building, we can, and we have in the past, we've changed walls. We can touch anything inside the building, but we can't build new construction under performance contracting. You're also allowed, under performance contracting, to choose who you'd like to work with. If there's, when it comes to subcontractors and you use the sole source option, which you are, we have to, Trane, as the energy services company, have to bid out all parts of the work except for the building automation system. So for instance, if you're going to replace a boiler, we would have to qualify at least three contractors and bid the work out. We would develop the scope of work and then bid the work out to them. It would be up to facility maintenance director or the school board to decide who they want to do that work. It does not have to be a low bid process, just making you aware of that. We like to use local contractors if they meet our, they have to be bonded and they have to meet our safety record. Moving forward. The next step would be to do the detailed technical audit. One of the analysis that we do is how you're using energy, why you're using energy, and where you're using energy. What's up on the screen is a profile of one facility, and you can pretty much tell when the building comes to life. I like to think of a building as a living, breathing entity, and you can see where it comes to life and how it spikes. That's not normally what we'd like to see. We'd like for this shape to look like a bread loaf. But it gives us a great indication of what's happening. Everything's coming on all at once. And in the energy world, that's not a great thing. We like a gradual increase. We like to use the least amount of energy as possible to maintain comfortable temperatures. And then we also like to see the building go to rest or go to sleep, not late at night, but as early as possible when the building becomes unoccupied. So there's a lot that we'll do in showing how energy is being used and when it's being used, and it allows us to understand how much energy savings is possible. Also with the detailed technical audit, we present how much you're spending to date, electricity, fuel, water, knowing that rate increases happen over time, estimate how much if you don't make any changes today, how much it will cost you going forward. And then after we implement our energy conservation measures, that green part there would show you the savings. This is just an example. We will be gathering information going forward so that we can present this for the 4 schools. This is just I wanted to put this in here because I think it's important that you understand Trane doesn't dictate what the project looks like. We're looking for energy savings everywhere we can. And as I mentioned, the low-hanging fruit comes from lighting upgrades, water upgrades, and building envelopes. Where that money is spent is up to you, and what facility improvement measures you want to do are up to you. So when we come back to you with the upgrades or facility improvement measures, we'll show the savings, we'll show how much it would cost, and the simple payback over so much time over the years. But that really is your decision on where you want to spend those energy savings. This is just a good example, a recent project that we did, and it's a cash flow neutral project. And the customer decided where to spend that money, which makes sense because who knows your schools better than you do. This is the Virginia Saves financing program, and this is by permission of Pittsylvania County Schools. We recently did a phase 2 for them. We upgraded to LED lighting, but the Virginia Saves program came out with Executive Order 36 last August, and luckily Pittsylvania County was the first to go through it. It did result in quite a bit of interest savings. How the program works is the federal government gave the state of Virginia around $70 million in qualified energy conservation bonds. And so what happens is you apply as you develop your project and you know how much the project is going to cost, you apply for a loan through the Virginia Saves program. The loan terms are the same as performance contracting. It can be 15 years or 20 years. I think what's notable here is the total interest payments if they had used conventional financing compared to using the Virginia Saves financing. And I want to fully disclose it's a lot of paperwork. It is a ton of paperwork, but it's quite a bit of energy savings, and it's the best, I guess, financing vehicle we have seen since ARRA. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yes. Simple payback in years. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Oh, absolutely. Could you go back 2 slides, would you, please? Yeah, okay. So we replaced coal-fired boilers with LP boilers, and so there's minimal costs, there's minimal savings associated with it. So they're not going to pay for themselves in that 15-year, but it's a facility improvement measure. They desperately needed new boilers and new chillers. using the energy savings from the lighting, the water, and the building envelope, it's a cash flow neutral project that all of these measures can be done in a 20-year project when you couple them all together. When you look at a loan term of 20 years, there's enough savings to pay for those improvements throughout. You're welcome.
Ms. Bailey, if I might follow up on that.
Sure.
This is a first step in the budgetary process. We know that we're not going to have sufficient savings at first to immediately keep us from having to go to the board to say our priorities over the 5 years are this and then this and then this. We will need to ask for monies to be able to do those things. But this helps us, number one, in knowing in the long term we get substantial savings, and number two, which I think would be something the Board of Supervisors would be interested in knowing that we're pursuing from this angle. But number two, it also helps us go through with inspectors on and helping us prioritize where we need to spend each year and put that in our budget moving forward. So this is not saying we're not going to have any need to go and ask for maintenance purchases to do things over the next 5 years. It's simply saying we're saving, and we've got a priority list, and in the long term it's going to help us with what we have to do. But in order to qualify for some of the state options, we needed to start the process quickly.
And I'll follow up a little bit on that. So the state contract that we have now expires next September, at the end of next September. We're unclear right now if they will renew a contract. I can't say renew. They will not renew the contract. If a new contract will come forth in July, we'll know after legislation, the General Assembly meets in January and February. But at this point, the performance contract that we have to date is what we're operating under, and we know it is going away at the end of September. So it takes us 6 months to do a detailed technical audit, and especially sole sourcing to get 3 bids on all the work, and to do our due diligence, you know, the best job that we possibly can. It takes time, let me just say that. We usually require monthly meetings to make sure that we're meeting the objectives and moving along to meet the time frame. This is what I do day in and day out, and I love it. I'm passionate about energy savings, and can speak to how well performance contracting has worked in the past, and how many of your peers have done performance contracting, and I would be happy to give out any of my references, or folks I've worked with in the past to let you contact them, because it's a great procurement method and a way of funding deferred maintenance where there's not readily capital money available. So to get started would be the Memorandum of Understanding for the detailed technical audit. Again, it's a state template. We fill in the blanks. The cost is 5 cents per square foot. We do have a March 1st deadline, so to speak, of that we have to have a preliminary detailed technical audit, and would require a letter from the school saying to Department of General Services saying that you are working with Train, and will need the 6-month extension through September 30th to finish. We foresee a June 26 to 32 weeks actually from the date of signing, so around June for the final detailed technical audit, and that would be the list of ECMs that we recommend, the costs associated with them, the FIMS, facility improvement measures, and the costs associated with them. Going back to what the superintendent was saying, we will come back with a project that's cash flow neutral, and we will also come back with a project that says, if you want to do everything all at once, here's what it looks like. And then what normally happens every time that I've done one, this is what happens. You pick and choose what makes sense to do at this time. You say, are we willing to put in an annual contribution and move forward with this, or do we just want a cash flow neutral project? The detailed technical audit cost, just looking at the 4 schools, would be around $14,446. That is, would be rolled into a project, no matter how large or small the project is. So that is not something you would pay for that's straight out of a budget, but would hopefully be rolled into a project, whatever size that is.
One question. Excuse me. After looking at some of our schools, and I know a lot of them have electrical baseboard heat,
Saw that.
and our air, for fresh air intake is bad in all of our elementary schools, and we know that. So wouldn't that probably be one of the first places that we would go to get new air conditioning, and heating, and fresh air to the kids inside the buildings? I mean,
Yes.
that would be an important part of it, I think, wouldn't it?
Yes, sir, and we will look at that. That's what Mr. Dalton asked us to do, is take a comprehensive approach to, of what would the school, over 15, 20 years, you know, what would be the most energy efficient system, and what would be, what we would call a comprehensive project. So getting rid of, we call them window shakers or mini splits, and looking at a central AC. Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes.
Thanks.
And we will look at fuel alternatives also within the project.
Thanks.
I can keep talking. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions, board members?
So when we get to action items, having consulted with Brian and others, I will be asking as an action item that you consider approving the expenditure to get the memorandum of understanding to move forward with this as a part of our budgetary process.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. You have anything else on the superintendent's report and comments?
Yes, the other item that I would like to ask you to consider tonight was one that I had originally asked about at the November meeting, which is the resolution to go to the legislature about taking another look at the state support for our rural schools. I am finding now, as I have been working with other school divisions on this, that it has become a priority item before the legislatures get started. And I would actually, if you all would approve that resolution tonight, I would like to take it to the Board of Supervisors and ask them to also consider approving it so that we can get it to the legislature when they get started. So that also would be an action item that I'd like for you to consider for tonight. And if you have any questions, having considered it between a regular meeting and tonight, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Anything else?
That's it.
All right, next item is item 6, action. First item is A, personnel. Get a motion that the school board approves the personnel recommendations.
So moved.
We have a motion, Mr. Honeycutt. Do we have a second? Second from Mr. Edwards. Roll call. Well,
Mr.
any
Rich-
discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie,
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt,
Yes.
Mrs. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant,
Yes. Item B, that the school board approves the elementary school maintenance plan. Do we have a motion?
So,
We have a motion from Ms. Garner. Do we have a second?
second.
Second from Ms. Bailey. Discussion. If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie,
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt,
Yes.
Mrs. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant,
Yes. Item C, that the school board approves the resolution for rural school funding. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Honeycutt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Edwards. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie,
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt,
Yes.
Mrs. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant,
Yes. Item D, school facilities proposal. Is there a motion on the floor for anything related to school facilities? If there are no motions, we're passed. Item 7, adjournment. We have a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
We have a motion. Mr. Edwards, do we have a second?
Second.
Second for Ms. Garner. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much.